Veterans Voice is a show that connects veterans and active members of the military to qualified guests who help you find programs and benefits you qualify for and discuss housing, education, career training, and other topical matters. Every show addresses issues that affect your life. Each week, Veterans Voice will begin with a story from one of our veterans about his or her experiences in the military. We want to thank these veterans for sharing these stories with us. And now, a voice from one of our veterans.
Every movie I'd ever seen growing up showed soldiers being praised, ticker tape parades, a sailor coming back and kissing the nurse. And I'm being told, take off your uniform. Don't let anybody know that you've just come back from Vietnam. Just go home.
Vietnam was a very confusing thing, and the country was in a battle. I was a part of that. As a veteran, I felt invisible.
I was surprised that there was that much vitriol in the attitude of the American people.
You could just sense the hostility.
I didn't know what I was coming home to.
We were spat on.
They would yell at you and call you names.
The protesters had bags of human excrement.
And they started chasing us.
In a split second, I remember thinking, why am I running away from my uniform?
The military was a convenient target.
The best reaction I've got was indifference. I should just get up, get back on the plane, and go back.
I had been a pretty avid Vietnam War protester.
I wanted an end to the killing. I wanted an end to the dying.
I actively evaded the draft.
It's my greatest regret in my life that I didn't serve my country in uniform.
Do I believe that I saw it at that time clearly? Absolutely. But the hostility and hatred, I'm not so happy with.
But they took it out on the service member who was only doing their duty.
And they come back with injuries, and then injuries that you can't see, which are even the worst injuries, the mental injuries.
People think, well, that war was so long ago, you should be okay now. You should be healed. That's a load of crap.
That hit me, and I said, I have to do this. I've got to reach out for all of us who were opposed to the war.
He said, could you find it in your heart to forgive me? Whether we went to the war or whether we stayed home and avoided the war, America at this 50th anniversary of Vietnam is to recognize that we as a country need to heal by coming together. For those guys who are still suffering, we must do everything we can for them.
The might of America is not its weaponry, it's its people. And now is the time to cohese and come together.
Good evening, everybody. It's Greg Brasso, your host of Veterans Voice Radio here, 95.9 WATD in Marsh. We have none other than Miss Charlene Hawk. Charlene, thank you so much for...
It is wonderful to be here. I feel like I need to have a Massachusetts accent.
Oh, well...
I am really missing an accent. I sound like everybody else.
You spent a little time in Massachusetts. Fess up, you practiced.
I did. 2 years in Southbridge.
And New England.
Right, and I tried. I should be native speaking right
well,
now.
Well, Charlene, and most of our audience is familiar with most of our guests. Why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little thumbnail sketch of what brought you to your current project.
Ooh. Well, I spent 20 years in broadcast journalism, 16 of those years with ESPN. So that's why I was living in Southbridge, but commuting into Bristol, Connecticut for a couple years. And I spent a lot of years telling stories and having to kind of synthesize a lot of information and bring it right down into a short story that people would be interested in watching, right? Well, fast forward to today, that's kind of what I do now. We got pulled in, so I started working for a technology company that specializes in digital content management. We are out of Utah. And we got pulled in by the military. This was back in 2005 with the 96th Regional Readiness Command. Their commanding general came to us and said, I need help telling our story.
Telling a story.
Telling the story. And here's why he wanted it. He says, I need something to give to my soldiers that says what they did, who they served with, what sacrifices were made, why we did what we did. Instead of just giving them a coin or a medal or a pin or something, I need something to tell their story. So Remember My Service Productions, a division of Story Rock, was born really in 2005. And I've been running that since 2005, so 12 years now. But a few years ago, started working with the Department of Defense. And in that interim, those last years, I've been working with half the National Guards in the United States. I've been working with, brigades and divisions and destroyers. But then we started working with the Department of Defense back in 2011 to ramp up for the Korean War 60th commemoration. We worked both with DoD and the Republic of Korea to put together this project, 250,000 books and documentaries called Korea Reborn, telling the story of what Korea did over the last 60 years with that seed of freedom that they were given during the Korean War to become one of the most powerful economies in the world.
With LG, Lucky Gold Stars, Samsung.
Hyundai, exactly. They were all supportive of it. And in fact, it looks like we're probably going to do another 50,000 to 100,000 copies that we'll be getting out. And that's when we start working with all the veterans.
And these books are given away free of charge for the veterans, correct?
That's what, exactly. I mean, now it's available just because of the demand. People wanted to buy one-offs, but the intent is to give it as a gift.
So, Charlene, you had a great deal of success with the Korean book.
Exactly, and that's kind of the model then for the Vietnam 50th, which, as we know, started in May 2012. That was the launch of the big 50th commemoration. We are right now in the peak years of that commemoration, and then it's going to start to ramp down and ends in 2025. So we needed to do, I think, more than any demographic of veterans, this has to be done right. We have to tell the story of the Vietnam veterans and make sure, and what this book is stories of service, duty, and sacrifice, because too often, I don't know about you guys, but I might mention Vietnam or something, and a kid would say, oh yeah, Rambo. We cannot have that be the stereotype, because that is not accurate. It's just not right. So what we wanted to do was help reframe, reshape what Americans think of the Vietnam veterans as our greatest asset in America. That's why service, duty, and sacrifice were the three key words that I really wanted to focus on. So we put together this book working with the Library of Congress, the Naval Historical Foundation, the Army Historical Foundation, and we put together all these stories, the Reader's Digest stories. That's what I love about it, is that you can just pick it up in the middle of the book and just read a story, and it represents all states, all services, MOSs, so you can pick that up and you might read a story of a truck driver, and then you might read a story of a POW, and then of a nurse, and then of a mail clerk, and then of a combat photographer, and all these different experiences. So by the time you finish this, you feel like you understand the breadth and the depth of the Vietnam War.
How did you collect all that data or information, Charlene?
The book itself, it took us about a year. My writing team went through all 20,000 interviews on the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, because we partnered with them, pulling out the nuggets. And it was like this funnel, because I knew that I wanted to get the best nuggets, but then I needed to make sure that all states were represented and all services. So then I'm going through and going, okay, we need to, the Army and Marine Corps had the most right there in the front line, so we had to make sure that they were very well represented. And then you got Navy and Air Force. We actually have one Coast Guard story.
Good. They need one.
Yeah. So we had one out of 160, but, for that ratio, I think that was important. At least they were represented. The other thing that people don't realize is, and I had to be really careful about this, but we had over 9 million who served, only 7,000 were women. But those 7,000, were absolutely critical. The nurses and there were others.
The MASH units that we see on a series were real.
Exactly. So we wanted to make sure that they were well represented as well. And so it doesn't quite follow the ratio, but there's, I think, 3 or 4 stories in there that we wanted to make sure were in.
So you've really tried to just take the stories of the stories.
Exactly. And then in the back, we did a documentary called The Journey Home. It's been already in a couple of international film festivals. And so you got the whole film right here in the back along with the book, and that's all about the coming home experience. And when Vietnam veterans watch this, they will realize they were not alone in that experience that they had, which was one of, I better not mention my service. I better not mention that I ever served in Vietnam, and I'm going to keep that quiet.
Yep.
So, Vietnam veterans really took the lead on making sure that this never happened again.
Yep. Story of the Vietnam War, and the tributes are being paid. But at this time, Tom, I'd like to introduce to our audience, reintroduce Tom Kane. And Tom, you've spent quite a deal of time in Vietnam lately. So why don't you just kind of talk to us a little bit about your history?
Well, my name's Tom Kane. I'm the director of the William Joyner Institute for the Study of War at UMass Boston, and I am a Vietnam-era veteran. I enlisted in the Army at the age of 18, in 1969 and served for about half of the Vietnam War. I have 3 brothers who are also veterans who served during that period. One of them was in the Special Forces. He was based in Thailand. At the same time, my father was stationed in Vietnam as a colonel. He was advising a province there. So we experienced the Vietnam War as family members, and some of us served in that region.
And were you all on the same side of the table during that period?
Well, we had some siblings that were in college that were protesting on campus as well. I mean, that was the nature of the times.
Wow,
but
isn't that amazing? Nice Thanksgiving dinner.
We all love each other, you know. So after my service, I went into the field of public health and had the opportunity to go to Vietnam and work for 6 years. My wife and I were both working there. She was with the Ford Foundation, and I was with a large NGO working for the U.S. War Victims Fund, helping people that had been injured in the war to get prosthetics and orthotics. My father is, I just came back from visiting him in Washington. He's 92 years old. Wow. He was a lieutenant in World War II, a captain in Korea, and a colonel in Vietnam.
Oh my goodness. Charlene, we have to give him 3 books.
I know, right?
A hat trick. That's a hat trick.
We may get a whole set of 6 at this point.
Yeah,
but,
wow.
But I was very grateful to be able to go back to Vietnam. My father visited me there too, and it was a reconciliating kind of experience where I was working for the U.S. government, but working with the Vietnamese in the aftermath of the war to kind of rebuild relationships. Right, and there were about 2.5 million soldiers. 9 million served during that era, but about 2.5 million served in Vietnam, and so there's still many of our veterans today are now of the Vietnam era as the World War II and Korean War veterans move on. But a lot of them need help. But now we have a whole new generation from Afghanistan and Iraq. There's about 2.5 million that have served there. Interestingly, over 250,000 of women soldiers have served in Iraq and Afghanistan.
250,000.
That's why this book that Charlene did is very important, because there's some women examples there. I think these younger veterans, women veterans, will read these stories and realize, I can have a voice too. I can tell my story.
Allie, how do you feel about that?
It's incredible, and just to go from 7,000 to 250,000. And women have been serving in combat for the longest time. It's just, recently that we're recognized.
Working at the VA hospital like I do, I'm dealing with Vietnam vets constantly, and the OIF, the Afghanistan, Iraqi vets, and how great it is to see the older Vietnam vets taking the young kids under their wing, and showing them, hey, do this, sign up for this program. Get this counsel.
I told you about my brother-in-law who was a combat medic, but he's second of 10 kids, and nobody in the family knew anything except that he had gone to Vietnam.
Yeah,
that's it.
Right.
And it wasn't until May 2012 I invited him to come with me to the wall for the Vietnam 50th opening. He had never been to the wall, and he came. And it was that experience. I took him to see all the motorcycles for Rolling Thunder.
Yeah.
There at the Pentagon parking lot. I thought he'd be just excited about the motorcycles. We got to the end of one row, and he had tears already coming down.
Absolutely, it's powerful.
And I said, do you like the motorcycles?
Yeah.
I said, no, they were wearing patches. They were proud of their service.
Yeah.
He says, it's time that I can be proud of my service.
Finally.
I went, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So he said, I have to go get me a hat. So he got a hat, 101st Airborne, Vietnam veteran. He had never had one before, and now he's proud of his service. Now it's the time to be proud of that service.
He was a young man, only 18, tall and thin, nothing about him was mean. A stand-up guy who liked what was right. Like many before him, he was sent there to fight. A young man eager for the world to see, the best part of him he could possibly be. While the honor guards march about face, the bagpipes cried, Amazing Grace. He did not fall, now his name is on the wall. He stood by his family, he stood by his friends, he stood by the men in his regiment. A picture on the mantle, a soldier in uniform. His mother says, "This is my son." A young man eager for the world to see, the best part of him he could possibly be, while the honor guards march. About face, the bagpipes cried, "Amazing grace." He did not fall, now his name is on the wall. I took some paper, I took some chalk, I lightly traced over his name. His face in my memory will never change. His name has been framed and hangs on the wall. A young man eager for the world to see, the best part of him he could possibly be, while the honor guards march. About face, the bagpipes cried, "Amazing grace." He did not fall, now his name is on the wall. He did not fall, now his name is on the wall. He did not fall, now his name is on the wall. On the wall. There we go. Yeah, yes, I wrote that about a friend of mine from high school. His name is Don Taylor, and he was about 21 years old when he went to Vietnam and lost his life.
I have a 19-year-old son.
Oh, wow.
And so I immediately, oh my gosh, what a gorgeous song.